Beautiful. All right. So, as I was saying, this topic in particular is building relationships through trust, respect, and communication. It's like I kind of shake my head because it's an interesting, I guess, phenomenon that just because a person is nonverbal, and frankly, even if a person is verbal, there is still this expectation that people with autism and an intellectual disability are going to be motivated or prompted by compliance. And compliance, I always say compliance is a four-letter word. If a person doesn't understand what's being what are the expectations and that they don't have choice in the matter, then you're going to have a situation where following directions may be all right for a short period of time, but then it becomes irrelevant because it's like, why am I doing this? And so the whole idea of building relationships, trust, and respect, and communication is through having functional communication. And interesting, again, I had a gentleman that I was working with today, and the job coach is giving him a job, and which will be great. And actually the task that he'll be doing it does meet his needs, but he has no functional communication. And the unfortunate thing is he didn't have the ability to know that he needed to go to the bathroom, and he went himself. So, and here he, this grown man he had lived in an institutional setting almost all of his life. And so he had always been prompted. And since people didn't understand, and he didn't have a functional way to communicate, and he didn't have access to a bathroom that he would normally have at work, at home, that he just did what he had to do. And so, those are the things that are, like I said, just are near and dear to my heart, because we have folks that, although they even can be verbal, they still only have perhaps receptive language. And they don't have expressive language, and then they also have difficulties with executive function, meaning answering questions as an open-ended question. Like this gentleman I asked this morning, I said, "Are you excited to go to work?" And he just looked at me, and then I gave him a yes or no question prompt, and then he was able to answer it. So, and I was trying to demonstrate that to the job coach to say, he's either not going to answer or he's going to just nod. And that doesn't mean that, don't expect that is actually the true meaning of what he's saying. He has been, prompted to say yes, and that's compliance driven. So giving that person an option so that they're able to tell a person their interests. And it's, like I said, it's more than just being in the room with somebody. It's more than just, there's much more. And so as we get through this, I like to go through like the Maslow hierarchy of need. So, the bottom part of the paradigm, I guess it's what's a pyramid? What's the other ziggurat? At any rate, the fundamental needs is the physiological, what drives us, either hunger, thirst, safety, social, self-actualization. And so this fundamental human need, if I were to take this gentleman that I had today, that his physiological needs were not being met, and he didn't know how to get his needs met. And so poor man wet himself, and he didn't have extra clothes, so he had to call his residential provider, who drove out and got him some new clothes. But he had to sit in wet clothes for nearly a half hour, and it's like, no, those are things that we need to put in place to make sure that he has the ability to request going to the bathroom, and or we also show him where the bathroom is so he can go to the bathroom on his own. And then we look at, as we go through each and every part of Maslow hierarchy of need. Back here, we've got, once you have, basically the basics of a person's existence, that then there's the safety, like having a house, having people that support you. Then the social part is being able to be out in your community, feeling safe. You start building self-esteem, and then there's the self-actualization that I'm respected. I know that I can trust people, some people, because all of my needs are being met. And like I said, relationship begins with trust, respect, understanding, communication, choice, a lot of patience. The golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Think about that. Would you want to be prompted every single time you did something? Rather than, I'm going to help this person. Again, this is just what I did this morning, is this gentleman was learning how to do a task. And so I set it up so it had a beginning, it had an end, and he knew how to sort everything because I had an example right in front of him. And the job coach said, "Oh, very good, now put this one here." And I said, "Let's just stop." I said, take the bolt and say, "We're gonna match." Put it in, and he picked up another one. I said, "Match." And he looked and he matched. So I didn't say, put the bolt here, put the nut here, and I didn't prompt. All it took was 3 times saying match, and then I could point after that, or I would, eliminate, 3 cartons to make sure he gets it into the one that he needs by looking. So it's a whole process of providing instruction, like those teachable moments that we have in a person's life. Every moment of every life, with the exception of when a person's in crisis, no one learns. Nobody. So, like I said, it was just, that was a great opportunity for her. She went to job coach, and she was new. She is new, and that's one of the reasons why I'm there working with her. And she said, I wouldn't have even known how or where to start with this gentleman. I didn't. And I said, well, that's where, having things that are structured, that are visually, the implications are visually set in front of a person, and that you teach to the system rather than telling them what to do. The knowledge and understanding the person you support. Again, just one of those situations that yesterday I was on a call with DEA, with their ombudsman, and they were taking testimony basically from families regarding their adults, son or daughter. They wanted to have input on, how services are going, what's going well, what's not going well. And one of the things that I commented on is, yes, there's a lot of training. And Malia, you had even said it today. It's like, well, respite care providers are personal care providers for a whole set of trainings that have been developed by the union. It's not disability specific. And it's not individually specific as well. So a person who comes in, say, to work with my son, they have an understanding of perhaps a person with an intellectual disability that has social reciprocity because they don't have a social, a social communication disorder of what autism is. And they have the expectation that we're going to have an immediate relationship. And it's like, no, this is going to take some time. So for people to have, where I put patience, it's going to take a while. It's going to be like, we need to have an understanding, and it needs to start with what they like, what their interest is. You're not going to have the person be compliant with, oh, let's do this. I brought something for you. It needs to be how we're going to get into the life of that individual and into what we call shared, not shared moment, but it'll come to me. Good golly. Anyway, I'll get into it. I'll remember it here in a minute. So we need the communication supports. We need to understand the person's strength, interest, and talent, joint attention. That's what it's trying to think. a joint attention activity where both eyes, both the person with autism and the individual are on an activity or a thing that they can interact with, rather than socially interacting. We're going to interact with something, and that's how we're going to start building a relationship. How that's one of the things I described is my son has a golden doodle, and he's a goofy boy, but he is Michael's companion dog. And the thing that's really nice, because Michael has a lot of social anxiety, but wherever Scooby goes, people immediately look at the dog and start engaging him. Is that your dog? Yes. And it's not about him anymore, it's about the dog, and that's that joint attention. And using, like I said, the strengths, interests, and talents. You know, his dog is something that's very, very important to him. That a person has choice, and choice. If I do a lot of training just on choice, because I've worked with a lot of providers, and they'll say, "Well, I gave him a choice. I asked him what he wanted for dinner." That's not a choice. That's a question. The choice is, we're going to have dinner. There is mac and cheese, or there is beef stroganoff. That's the choice. And trying to help people understand that choice means giving a person basically a menu. How can I make a choice? Tell me what the options are. And surprisingly, that people don't understand, if we don't provide the choice, there could be the likelihood they'll say pizza. Well, we don't have pizza. All right, hamburger. Well, we don't have hamburgers. By then, even if you get to the hamburger stage, there is a likelihood there might be some aggression, because it's like, what do you mean? Well, I'm not going to have pizza or a hamburger. These are the things that I've wanted. So what are the choices? What's the availability? And that also helps reduce people's stress and anxiety on both parts. You know, walk a mile in your shoes, you know, that perspective of, you know, I was looking at this gentleman this morning, and I've known him for a long time. I had forgotten his name, or I don't want to say I've forgotten about him, but I haven't seen him for a long time. I worked with him about 10 years ago, and it's like, oh my gosh, here he is again. And so that he's nonverbal, that he just sits and he waits for somebody to prompt him. It's like, oh my gosh, can you imagine a whole life of just waiting, anticipating somebody or something that's either going to insult his sensory nervous system, or that is going to have some sort of expectation for him, and he has no control over anything other than using a behavior to get his needs met. It just was very heartfelt, the fact that this man is there, sitting there, and he's 50 some years old, and he's still learning how to functionally communicate. That's hard to even wrap my head around. So walking a mile in a person's shoes, rather, you know, again, it's, you know, I've heard, well, let's say his name is Brad. Well, Brad won't get in the car. So how do we get Brad in the car? Well, does Brad know why we're getting in the car? Well, I told him we're going to work. What does work mean for Brad? Well, we're going to go do some exploration. So that needs to be explained to him, that he has choice. Where are you going to do the job exploration? Where are you going to do, how, you know, can you imagine all of a sudden a stranger pulls up that I've only known or met twice or 2 or 3 times, get in my car and you're going to drive with me. It's, if we don't take those steps at the very beginning to develop that relationship and trust, we can actually set a person up to be vulnerable and victimized. And again, a person needs to be able to say yes or no. And we also need to presume competence. People make really unjust assumptions because the person may be nonverbal, when in fact, it doesn't, just because they're nonverbal doesn't mean that they don't understand every single word you're saying. And we have to presume confidence, and we need to direct all of our conversation if it's towards a gentleman. Like for Brad this morning, it was like, Brad, so I'm going to talk with Tracy. and we're gonna be talking about your job. And I talked with Brad, just as I would Malia, as I would you folks, is I am presuming confidence. And I'm also going to give him as much information as possible so that he can have choices and contribute to our conversation. Purpose versus production. And again, if we look at, and I'm thinking now in the way of education or even employment in the community, that what's the purpose for this individual? What's the purpose for them to participate, to be part of their community, rather than, this is what they can do, this is how they're going to do it. So it's one of those things that when I work with job coaches, they get so frustrated because it's like, we got to show them all the work that they can do. That's going to come later. So what we want to do is make sure that there's a purpose, that this person understands why they're there, that they want to be there. Production will come later. And it's a process that's not about a dog and pony show. It's about, we have actually took the time, you've built the relationship. You have exposed the person to a scenario before you ever take them in to say a workplace. Always have follow through. Always, if you're going to promise something, make sure you're going to follow through. I've, had families and friends and teachers, etc., that have promised something as kind of a first man concept. You finish your homework, and then we're going to go get, a soda or something. And they'll go, well, no, we don't have time for soda. And it's like, you have just crushed that trust, and you have to follow through. I don't care if it's like we have to have a splash in a cup, tiny little cup. You need to follow through with what the expectations are. The other thing is taking data. That's something that it's something that's important, and I know it's kind of boring for some folks, but if we show that, let's say, again, we're looking at either a residential situation, employment, even in school, that the perspective from the person's point of view is only their perspective until it's down on paper, and then we can measure it. Otherwise, everybody's going to have a different vantage point. Everybody's going to have a different view. And this way, we can show that a person is either making progress or isn't. And that's really important, especially in school, especially for work, to say that, we started off here with, we didn't have any functional communication. We were just starting using visual supports. And now we're at step 2. We're in the community, generalizing those tools in the community. That's progress. And so taking that, and I would even jump to the idea, which I have done with other folks, is build kind of a rubric of what the task is, what are the expectations of the task, so that we can measure. And it also helps when we do that is we can measure how well the supports are working, the support person. Because if one person is still on number 1, and we have another person that works with the same, and they're at a 3, there's a disconnect. What's going on? And rather than, this is another one of my little platforms, is we should not have to wait. The person with the disability, the person with autism, the person with the intellectual disability should not have to wait to get services or fail for a length of time before they get services. They need services up front. Why do we have people fail? And it's not because they're failing, it's because the system failed them. So how do we put that on the front end so we don't have people going through this long duration, maybe even changing job coaches, maybe even changing resident provider, maybe even changing teachers. And it's not about the personality, it's about how they were instructed and how the consistency of it was. And this is, it is all about the person that we support. And I don't think it's not about you. When they'll say, well, I think he became very aggressive, how do you stop the aggressiveness? And it's like, this is where we need to really tease out the reason for this and the reason why. Why did this person need to use their aggression to get their needs met? I'm sorry, what do you mean? Oh, we just needed to have them stop. That's exactly, but I need to find out the function of this behavior. Why does this person need to engage in this behavior to get his or her needs met? Once we figure that out, we're going to be better, in a better position to be able to support this person. And again, that's just the example I had this morning. I have a video of a gentleman that had lived in a residential rehabilitation center, otherwise known as an institution. And when he first started working, well, actually, he wasn't even working. He was in a sheltered workshop, and he had been working there for almost 18 years. And when he would get upset, the support plan said to take him outside for a walk. And what he would do, and this is what the executive director of his agency said, we would take him for a walk, and he would bash his head on forklifts on the curbing until he would bleed. And they've done that for 18 years. And all it took, and I'm not kidding, all it took was that the same day I was there at this shelter workshop, and I heard this noise. And the director, I said, what was that? And she goes, oh, that's Brad. Like, oh, she didn't do anything, nothing happened. And then it got to a louder utterance, not a word, just a sound. And I said, what's that, Brad? Oh yeah, he's getting really upset. Nothing, no movement, nothing. And I'm like, And then he dropped the F-bomb and started screaming. Then she jumped up and everybody was running and trying to find out what was going on. It was like, why does he have to get to that point to get his needs met? We're training this person to say, I have to get to this level to get my needs met. And when I started working with him, it was a day that he was having a lot of difficulties. And we found out he was only transferred in a bus that no other person was on because he had aggression towards other folks. And that bus was caught in traffic, and it was going to be like 20 or 30 minutes late. And they're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? He's going to tear this place apart. And so I said, all I did was I got Post-it notes, and I said, Rod, I put 5 Post-it notes. I said, when the Post-it notes are gone, the bus will be here. Here's a cup of coffee. You love coffee and you love Lay's potato chips. There's a combination, but whatever. That was what he wanted. So we got that for him. And in the meantime, they're finding out. It's like, yeah, traffic is moving. We should be there in 15 minutes. And so I went over and I took one of the Post-it notes and I said, when these are gone, the bus will be here. So it was a process of explaining to him time passing, rather than saying it's going to be here in about 20 or 30 minutes. That means nothing, but something concrete that showed. And it doesn't mean that everything was like 10 minutes. It was, we're getting more information as it's getting closer. I'm taking more off. And just as like the bus is coming up, we can see it come up the hills of kind of probably about a quarter mile, and you can see the bus coming up. I took the last one up and I said, get your coat and the bus will be here. He got up. Never in that 30 minutes did he engage in anything. I mean, they were just like mouths open on the floor, like, how did you do that? And I said, it wasn't asking him to be compliant, to just sit. He doesn't understand the concept of time passing. And he needed something concrete to help him know. And then his anxiety went away. He didn't have to worry and fret. He didn't have to just sit there and be compliant, because that's what they were trying to do before, taking him for walks, sitting with him, giving him, more food and more coffee, and none of that worked. So that kind of started the snowball for this guy is, holy cow, maybe there's something to this. So, and that's where I said, it's not about changing the individual. It's about how you and I are going to change how we interact with the individual. And so it's not about us in the fact, well, actually it is about us that we have to change, but it is, we're not a victim in the situation. We're actually part of the problem. We're actually creating more difficulty for an individual. Trust sometimes takes years to build, seconds to break, and forever to repair. I mean, that pretty much says it all. It is interesting. I mean, that's all it takes, because if you have just that little shred of doubt that this person's going to follow through, for somebody who's neurotypical, just imagine for a person who has neurodivergent brain that says this person, I can't trust this person. And it's interesting because I have had situations where, and I don't know about, I mean, all of us that are here, they have kids with autism that just I find it remarkable because I mean, and I'll again take my son for example, that a person that comes in the door, it's like he immediately sizes them up. He will know whether they are, I mean, he will either become very social with them, or he immediately has some difficulty. I mean, that they are very skeptical. And it's like, what do you see? What do you see that I don't see? And he will become very distrusting of an individual over, say, another individual, and they could be coming in the door at the same time. They can be complete strangers, and he will gravitate towards one and not the other, and never with the other. It's an interesting phenomenon. So if you want to create the lack of motivation for someone with barriers to whatever, make trust, love, and acceptance always contingent on good behavior. And I can tell you, if we're having a bad day and you came into the house and let's say you slam the door and you're just kind of upset that if one of your loved ones says, hey, go back and close that door. Right. That's not acceptable. Do you think that would go over very well with any of us? No. Your first inclination would be, at least mine, and most people would say, is like, holy cow, you must have had a bad day. I mean, there's an inference in that. That's when you start building, that's when a person has, knows that they're being heard. There's a process of acceptance that is happening there, and that I don't have to have good behavior to get my needs met. If that were the case, we would all be pretty much up a creek without a paddle. And so this, I kind of built this on my stair steps, choose success, and it, aligns very much with Maslow hierarchy of need. But it is looking at the physiological, biological health, comfort, and well-being. So we want to build on a firm foundation, move one step at a time. Because just because you have a good relationship with a person doesn't mean that you can already go to, I'm asking you to do things in your work site or even at home. There is a whole process and you have to kind of measure that. So it's like, move one step at a time. Well, we've got this person is happy and healthy in this situation. So I'm thinking about a student, say in a classroom. We go into the classroom and it's very distracting. The lights are buzzing, the fluorescent lights, it's very annoying. The sensory system is out of line. Does that make his or her physiological comfort and well-being, does that mean that? No. Are they going to then be able to build a relationship? have experience, strengths, and interests that we can actually change and help provide teachable moments for this individual. It's a process, each and every one. And it's another situation I had, and this was a project I was doing. And we were all on this Zoom call, and a job coach, well-meaning person. I mean, and they were very committed to finding a job for this person with autism. And she said, we have the perfect job for her, but we can't get her into the building. All right, well, what is it about the building? I don't know. I said, so let's go back and say, are all this physiological needs being met of this person? I don't know, but the job is great. And I said, if we're not meeting all those needs, then it's not a perfect job. Because we don't have the trust, we don't have the environmental supports. This person is not going to gain that self-awareness and self-confidence, because they're always going to be in hypervigilance, always looking for something that's going to happen. And so when we ask a person to do things, if we haven't met all those steps, it's for naught. And so identify work or community that is meaningful to the person, not to us. It is all about that individual. And something that's intrinsically motivating for any of us. Oftentimes we'll do it, barring sleep, barring food. It's just like something that's very motivating to us. And I'm that way when it comes to gardening. I love to get out and do work in my yard, and I will lose time just because I'm doing something. I'll forget to eat, I'll forget to drink, and 3 hours have gone by, and I'm like, oh, I'm not getting busy. Well, I haven't eaten in 4 or 5 hours. So we want the activity for the person to be as intrinsically motivating to them that it's exciting to want to participate rather than I have to. Because most people that we support, the paycheck is not the motivator. It's the activity in the job that is the motivator. Like I said, a lot medical hierarchy of needs, the same thing, the basic supports need to be in place for the individual. Some of that means that we need to review the person's records. Again, this gentleman that I'm working with this agency, a gentleman, she wanted me to come in and start working with him. And I said, how does he communicate? Where? And she's like, I don't know. So, well, all right, so have you looked at his records? Well, I looked at some of the progress notes from the past, job coach, and I said, well, have you looked over the person-centered service plan of this person? What is that? All right, well, let's go through that. So we went through it. And it's not so much the algorithm and the basically the scoring. It's the narrative part where people put in their input and said, we can go through this and we can garner a lot of information. And we did. It was pretty incredible. And then I said, let's go over the progress notes. Let's read them. And what does it mean? And what do you think that we can do to change perhaps the trajectory of this person's ability to get paid employment? So we looked through them, found out what worked, what didn't work, what types of supports that the person would likely need to use. And what have they been exposed to in the past? I work with a lot of transition students that they go to a job coach, and the job coach has never had training on, let's say, using the software ProLocal to Go, which is a augmented voice output system that it can be output visual, auditory output, but it also can just be a visual ability to organize their life. So to have somebody that has left school with a functional communication device to now I'm in the adult service system, and nobody knows how to use it. So the fallback is prompt and compliance, rather than having the person have a functional way to communicate. And like I said, seek relationship and communication, not compliance. Take time to review information, focus on strengths, accommodations, and multiple styles of learning. Don't reinvent the wheel. Do you know how many times, and again, walk a mile in the shoes of the person that you're supporting. Do you know how many times a person has been evaluated or assessed in their lifetime? It's like, oh my gosh, I mean, every time, they get a new, well, every year, the DDA comes in, we need to do our annual assessment. Then we have a job coach that comes in and they do their assessment. Then we might have a residential provider, they do an assessment. And then we do an assessment at a work site, and we do an assessment looking for community inclusion opportunity. Individuals are assessed and basically processed based on their disability and not their strengths and interests. So don't reinvent the wheel. Don't make a person go through another source or another series of assessments. But all you have to do is pick up a paper or look at their file because all the information is already there. Need to have a conducive living, working, and recreational opportunity that is based on that person's sensory needs. It's, a person likes music and they can't understand why they don't want to go to a concert. Well, the acoustics in the whole room is just, they can't handle it. Now, if you go to something that maybe is an outdoor concert, that they're able to sit further back, that we're, adapting to that person's needs, then we're building on strengths, the whole scenario, and not just one basically spoke of the wheel. Like I said, rather than reinventing the wheel, the employment specialist, residential provider, community inclusion specialist, the teacher need to learn the way the person learns and provide multiple modalities of instruction. And I mean, if you've had kids go through school, each teacher has a different way of instructing. Each job coach has a different way of instructing. Each residential care provider has a different way of instructing. So we have a person who has the most difficulty adapting to other people socially, to constantly need to adapt to everybody's way and format of communication. Again, it's looking at what does the person need on the front end. We don't wait for that person to fail before we go, oh, maybe we should do something different. Having it upfront, learning, that's our job, is what do I need to learn to be effective for this individual? It's not about, I'm going to come in and you need to be compliant towards me for what I said. It needs to be supported, that I understand and I want to help, and you're going to help me understand you as well. This is it should be a reciprocal situation, regardless if the person seems like they are interacting with you or not. We need to presume confidence. That relationship development, the relationship between people who interact because of their work, their education, etc. Level of cooperation sufficient to allow work to be done, progress to be made, functional or effective relationship. And that's all, we can, at least I can categorize people that are either are my good friends, or I have a good relationship with somebody because of my respect. We can categorize the relationships we have with both. A person with autism, again, we look at the dyad of impairment. It is a social communication disorder and restrictive repertoire behaviors. That's a dyad of impairment. So when you think any interaction with a person who is neurodivergent, who has a social communication disorder, you are meeting them right where their disability is. It's different than, say, a person who has a physical challenge, they're in a wheelchair. You immediately go out and say, oh, well, first you need a ramp. No one, it's like, that should be a no-brainer, of course. We need to think that when we meet a person with autism, it means what ramp am I going to have in place so that person's going to either build a relationship have access to a building or a situation, what is that ramp? What is that prosthetic device that's going to help this person and help me interact with this individual? Because if it's compliance based, it's not going to work. This is, one of the staggering, unfortunate statistics is when we have compliance-based services and supports, is the likelihood of sexual victimization increases. So this is, I don't know if I put the date on this. This is like, I want to say in the early 2000s, but it's psychologists in Canada asked 95 adults who were verbal with an autism spectrum disorder, whether they had been raped, coerced, yes. That rate, 78% of sexual, I got something in my way here. Sexual victimization is significantly higher than the rate of those without autism. So 47% of tremendous concern, according to researchers who published their findings. So the issues are a person who's nonverbal, unable to share an experience, and who has been compliance trained. Those are, unfortunately, where predators will literally focus on are those type of scenarios. Whether it's a person with autism or a, let's say, a stroke victim that's unable to talk, unable to share experience, these are individuals that unfortunately are targeted towards victimization. So if you know that stats on sexual abuse of developmentally disabled people and still continue with compliance-based programs, we're basically grooming that individual for a future of abuse. We have a responsibility, again, is through building a good rapport with the person, taking time to provide them communication that's reciprocal, whether it's, being able to point at a picture, do a nod, any way that they're able to provide you input in a reciprocal fashion. That's going to be one of the most important things we can do for an individual. In the event that person has been sexually or victimized in any way, that person then lives with what is basically PTSD, that they are hypervigilant, constant scanning the environment for possible threats. They're always on guard and always accompanied by a state of increased anxiety, which leads to exhaustion. And those are things, like I said, that are not compliance training is, like I said, is not a friend to anyone. Because it's a social communication disorder. So a person who can be coerced, individuals that are oftentimes groomed or victimized. Customers who serve and support have been exposed to regular practices of segregation. They've been through compliance training, medicalization, aversive conditioning, and restraints. I look at this and I'm like, yep, that's the unfortunate reality. I mean, my son is 39 years old, and I would say he has had all 5 of those experiences in his life.
What is aversive conditioning?
Meaning being sprayed in the face. Because they have done something, so you do something wrong, I'm gonna spray in the face.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that this was happening. This was when he was in a 3 to 5 program. His teacher literally had him restrained in a chair. And when she wanted him to say something and he didn't, she would spray him in the face. And the medicalization, again, it's one of those things where we oftentimes look to doctors to help us understand or quote fix autism. And autism is a neurological disorder the brain is wired differently. There are some things, just like there's, anti depression medications, there are things that really can be helpful. But having the use of being put on 12 or 13 different psychotropic medications and anti-anxiety and antidepressants isn't beneficial. Matter of fact, a lot of the medications have secondary side effects that really hurt the individual. And I mean, I'm just thinking, one guy, he was constantly looking for water. And they're like, no, you can't have water, you can't have water. Well, almost 3 of his medications out of the 8 that he was taking caused dry mouth. And yet, we're not going to let you have water. But they didn't know what the side effects were. And that was one of the things when we had a team meeting, I said, so if he's always looking for water, again, it's looking at the function of the behavior. Not that we need to stop him doing that. But what we did is he has access to water when he needs it. And so he doesn't have to go over and take somebody's water right off their table at a restaurant. It's like he has a water bottle. He can access it whenever he wants. So all those things are, we're still in that cycle. I mean, I look back, that my son's almost 4 years old. There are some things that have certainly have evolved and gotten better. And then there are other supports and mindsets that haven't. And I would say, practice of segregation is one of those areas that there is, again, the medical model and the social model. The medical model of any disability is that you need to be compliant, you need to socially integrate with everybody and follow every rule. The social model is anybody that comes in the door, we need to make them feel welcome and that they're part of the community. But we still have the mindset of until you can perform, you can't be part of us. A situation I had of this is actually a person who is not diagnosed with autism, but clearly he does have autism. He's nonverbal and he likes to play, I can't remember the game. At any rate, he likes to play this one game, and they found a senior recreational center that plays this game, and he wanted to go. It was very exciting. Well, apparently the people that have gone there have done this for a long time. He wasn't quite up to their speed, and they asked him not to come back. And it's like, wow. It's and it was actually the director, it wasn't the people that were playing it. It was like, no, it's not a good fit. And in actuality, he would be given, a few more tries. I'm sure he would be able to keep up the flow without any problem. But it was interesting that they kind of focused on his disability, because there were other people that were seniors that had strokes, that there a lot of accommodations were being met for that. But this person who had an intellectual disability and autism weren't. And yet they had similar support needs. So there is a practice of segregation in a lot of places, unless that person is able to perform and stay up with, the neurotypical folks, then they're not welcome. And, the side effect to that is that if we're not welcome, then we're going to build our own. And sometimes when we build our own, all we're doing is that we keep on promoting segregation. The unfortunate reality is our kids, our sons and daughters, continue to be ambassadors for inclusion and awareness of autism. Again, it's one of those ideas that the sole responsibility is on the person with autism to teach other people. And of course, with their support individuals as well, that of course we can we can do this together. All of us are going to need some sort of accommodation sometime in our life, all of us. And when, sometimes when it disrupts, it's like we have to look at, and it just becomes I don't want to say empathy, but it's a sense that of course you belong. Of course, this is the place for you. And we're not there yet. I mean, we're just still struggling along. And again, sort of like with schools, you know, I remember, and I know that's still a situation that for a general, for a student to be generalized into a regular education classroom, that you had to go ask a teacher, would it be all right if this student comes into your classroom? Can you imagine?
They're still suffocating.
That's what I mean, yeah. And it's like, I mean, because when you look, all right, here's my little soapbox, so bear with me, that access to services based on disability is a civil right, right? Of course it is. So to have to go and literally plead your case to a teacher to allow this person to come in, what is that telling the students in the classroom?
They're not wanted.
Yeah, they're different, they're not wanted. And that whole maintained of that segregation mindset is in their head. I have a friend who was born with spinal bifida and he's in a wheelchair. He's also a educational assistant at a high school, and that he oversees like 3 students. And the janitor actually came up to him, and he looks very young to begin with. I mean, he is probably in his 30s, but he doesn't look like he's 30. Anyway, they said, you're supposed to be over there. And he was like, excuse me? He goes, all the special education, they all go over there. You need to be over there. And he was like, no, I work here.
And they should actually be
Yeah,
here.
and these are the students that are, those you can't even see, my students that are part of this, that are all, you wouldn't know. I mean, and he was dumbfounded. He was like, what, really? I didn't know. He had no idea. And that he, you know, had not met Dave before. It was, Dave said it was more than just a teachable moment. Dave said he just, you know, for a person to get angry while they're in a wheelchair, you just really can't stand up and, you know, he was like, I was probably holding onto my wheelchair so hard, you know, I was almost shaking because he couldn't believe that this, and he was you know, one of the environmental custodians that he was just helping direct people to where they're supposed to be. And it literally, when I look at it, you know, especially a school setting, it should be from the building principal to everyone in between, including the custodian, has a idea of acceptance. It's just a process that we're still having to go through, even to the point of healthcare. Anybody have any issues getting your son or daughter into healthcare situations?
I mean, I had a therapist for my daughter and she said, well, I really can't help her because I'm not trained in autism.
Right.
And I said, well, my daughter enjoys coming to see you, so we're just gonna see you.
Yeah. I mean,
Maybe learn something about it. How hard could that be?
How hard can that be? And as a therapist, it's like, you know, I would be upfront and say, you know, I'm not familiar with this, but I'll do some research. And if you can help, you know, enlighten me, that would be great too. I mean, you would hope that somebody would be that way. I mean, my son just in these last few years has had some significant health situations. One, and that's shame on me, because it went on for 9 months, that I actually like the primary care physician, but he doesn't take Michael's symptoms seriously. And Michael had a showing of faint blood in his urine. And I took a picture, sent it to him, and he's like, oh, no, that's not unusual. That's not unusual. I'm like, all right, is he in pain? Does he have fever? Does he? No, none of that. Though he does have hesitation. It's fine. It's just, it'll run its course. You know, I'm like, all right, just busy with other things. And then almost 3 months later, he has the same thing. Now it's a little bit brighter. And I said, this is what happened. And he's like, no, that's nothing to really concern yourself about. It's still within normal limits. And so I asked my husband, is it normal? Have you ever had blood in your urine? And he's like, oh my gosh, no. If I did, he goes, I would be in urgent care or the emergency or on the phone talking with my doctor saying, holy cow, what's going on? And so that finally I asked the primary care doctor, I said, I think we need, not a thing. I said, we need a referral to a neurologist and we need to get this addressed. And got the appointment with the doctor, and I was so impressed with him. I mean, he came in the door, didn't even look at me. He just went straight to Michael, shook his hand. He said, I'm glad you're here. I want to help you. Do you want to talk with me about your situation? Or do you want your mom? And he was like, great. And I was on the verge of tears because I was like, he respected Michael. To the point where Michael was just like, he actually fell asleep on my shoulder. He was that relaxed. And come to find out, he actually had a 13mm kidney stone wedged in the uterus between the kidney and the bladder that had been embedded so deeply, they had to cut it out and put a stent. But because he has such a high threshold of pain and he has no other symptoms, the primary care doctor was just like, oh, it's no big deal, it's no big deal. When somebody else, I should not have let it go on 2 times. I should have insisted on the first time, which again, shame on me. But again, it's just the access. Another scenario, took Michael to a dentist. And the dentist was like, yeah, we're not going to be able to help him. You need to take him to a dentist that's going to take him under general anesthesia. And I was like, well, we thought we would give it a try. Thank you so much. And then I don't know how I got connected with this other dentist, but they said, you should try them. Oh, I know, it was a friend of mine. So I was like, all right, made an appointment for Michael, went in. And I actually took Michael 3 times there. First we drove by, second time we parked, third time we went in, we introduced ourselves and we found out, this is the guy who's going to be waiting, that's going to greet you when you come in. We're going to wear a mask. We did the whole run through. We had a social story, we had a visual, we had everything. To the point that Michael was able to go back in the room. She cleaned his teeth. And then they had something which I had never seen before. They had a portable x-ray machine. You didn't have to go to a different room. You didn't have to just, they didn't have to do something in this chair. She actually had it in her hand. She just took the picture and we got a full view of Michael's teeth. And I was just, and then, well, he had a cavity. And I thought, well, all right. So we went in and we got made an appointment. And I was like, if we get this done, I'd be surprised. I mean, I was fully content of saying, we tried. Michael had his tooth drilled, filled, and left. First time. And it was because the attitude, literally, from one dentist's office to another, the attitudes of acceptance were completely different. And so, like I said, this practice of segregation, the practice of you can't go through my system, therefore you're excluded. While this other one was like, what can we do to make this an acceptable, dentist? I'm not a dentist fan myself, but make this an acceptable experience. And they were very accommodating. That's where, like I said, some of the pushback is still, not some, a lot of places it's still that way. Herb Lovett, who was one of these strong advocate for people with disabilities, he says the message is clear and convincing. We cannot help others in a meaningful way, in a sustaining way without forming a working relationship with them and with patience and sensitivity. Again, just looking at those 2 dentists. One was like, we have a system we put people through. And the other one was like, what do you need to be successful? That's the unfortunate reality is oftentimes we have to go shopping, looking for someone who is going to be, whether it's that teacher, or I'll take a person with a disability, or it's a dentist, like, yes, we will work with whatever. Unfortunately, that should be the norm, and it's unfortunately not. And it basically comes down to the 4 elements of empathy, how the person sees the world through their lens, walking the mile in their shoes. That we appreciate them as human beings, leave judgment aside. This person that comes in that has, high anxiety, that we have to appreciate that person for who they are. They are an individual. They are, I remind people that Michael he's a son, he's a brother, he's an uncle, he's a nephew. He's a loved and valuable member of our family. Of course, we want him to belong. There's communication that's understood and understanding of feelings. And basically the understanding of both feelings, that I have feelings, you have feelings. And although a person with autism may not demonstrate a lot of feelings, it doesn't mean that they don't have them. Matter of fact, they do. It just doesn't mean that they know how to label it. Can you imagine if you had all of a sudden, because our bodies have a physiological manifestation of an emotion before it actually hits our brain. It literally is instinctual, that fight, flight, or freeze. So when it's just like, people say, oh, it made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. Well, what was? I don't know why, it just was creepy. That is instinct. And so can you imagine all of a sudden the hair standing up the back of your neck? You don't know why. And you don't have a functional way to communicate with somebody that this is creepy, I don't like this. This person creeps me out, or I like this person. So understanding that, the perspective from somebody else's point of view and vice versa. I can have something different than you think is something that's valuable and very important in relationship development. So relationship development, like I said, shouldn't be ignored. Building trust, safety, respect, dignity, building on commonalities, interests, and strengths. And that's why I actually have these things listed below. The different pictures. You're probably wondering, like, what the heck? So my son, Michael, loves anything that has to do with Catholic nuns. So he loves Sister Act, he loves anything, Father Brown, Flying Nun, anything that has to do with nuns. That's something that he just really enjoys. So when somebody comes in to meet him, if they said, I hear you like Whoopi Goldberg in Sister Act, he's just like, what? You're speaking my language. That is where they start building that reciprocity. Another where it shows the fingernail polish. This was a young woman who lived in an institutional setting. She went to school in the community, though it was in a portable outside of the school. Just meant she went from one isolation situation to another, but at any rate, she was still out there. When she would go back to her cottage where she lived with 7 other women in this at the institution, that they would have room clears. Let's say her name is Roseanne. Roseanne is upset, room clear, everybody has to leave, and we're just shutting it down until she can stop. And it just so happened there had been a room clear, and I came in because I was supposed to be working with her in the job coach. Oh, you can't be anywhere near her because it's a room clear. She's very upset. I'm like, all right, because I already had something already planned for us to do. And thought, this is not, none of this at this time is a teachable moment. Everybody's on edge and they're not listening. She's not listening. But I also know, after many years of training, that to approach a person, I want to make sure I have boundaries in front of me. So there was a table, and I was like, Roseanne, do you want to have a seat? I've got fingernail polish. And she was like, she was very girl. She loved anything fingernail polish, hair clips. And I gave her a hand massage and I put fingernail polish on her and spent the next 6 hours with her. Just walking around doing things, because I didn't treat her with the condition that you have to be compliant and be socially appropriate before I'll interact with you. And I had that respect of her she just did a 180. And again, it's kind of like, what did you do? It's just like, I just would treat her, I'm treating her the same way I would treat you. It's just, that's the way. And the coffee, Starbucks coffee. I had a woman that, she was working with a job coach in an agency, and wherever she went, she would try and get coffee. If you had a coffee cup on your desk at work, whatever, she would run and want to get your coffee. She would take your coffee. She went into Target and they were making fresh coffee. She dove over the counter to get her coffee. And of course, they're like, we can't go any place because she will want coffee, and we have to eliminate coffee everywhere. We don't have coffee at the house. We have no coffee. Has anybody ever been on a diet? If anybody's ever said you can't eat this, does that stop us from thinking about it? That's what you want the most. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is not. So I again started working with her. We got in the car, and there's a long story that went with it, but one of the things that the job coach or the residential provider came out, she said we put her in the back seat, you put her seatbelt on, and have the window down a little bit, she likes a little breeze in the air, and she likes country western music. I'm like, all right, so we did that. She got in the car, we drove for about 5 minutes, we came back, we were finished, and then she went into her house. The next day, when she came out, and I did this for 5 days in a row, the next day she came out, we just both stopped at the car, and she like looked at me like, I was like, aren't you gonna open the door? And I gestured to her, and she opened the door, and she sat down. And then I used picture exchange. Would you like me to help you with your seatbelt? And I had her I took it, gave it to her, and then I said, give it back, and then I will put your seatbelt on. So I used a picture exchange and pivotal response training through that whole process. That by the time the end of the week, she was now sitting in the front seat, putting her seatbelt on and turning the music on to what she wanted. Because one of the things is that they didn't presume competence. They were told this is all she's able to do. And in fact, she had the capacities to do it. She also had the capacities of understanding, because we went to Starbucks, knowing she's going to be, she's just going to want coffee like nobody's business. And I gave her a visual. We're going to get coffee. You're going to have 1 cup. You're going to have one sugar. We're going to sit at the table, and then we'll leave. And I showed the whole process. She stood in line. She waited. She kept looking at me like, aren't you going to take, I could just be like, aren't you going to drag me out of here yet? And I'm like, you're doing such a good job. She got her coffee, we went and sat down, she poured her sugar, and she stirred, and she stirred, and she looked and stirred. One of the things that had started this whole thing is because she never drinks her coffee. What she loves is the warmth, and she loves to smell it. She gets a lot of sensory input from it, and she loves to watch people. But because she wasn't ingesting it, it's a waste. And so we're not going to let her have that anymore. Can you imagine if somebody, I can tell you how many random cups of coffee I have at my house in the morning sometimes. It's like, where'd the coffee go? And it's like I have a whole cup of coffee that's completely cold. How much do I waste? Nobody comes, my husband doesn't come around and say, you aren't going to have coffee anymore because you waste too much. So we need to take those things in consideration. She had the opportunity. We got her a Keurig. So she makes 1 cup of coffee every day. And she likes to just sit and hold it. And she watches TV. Wherever they go, she knows that she can have 1 cup of coffee. She's happy. So anyway, the motorhome. There's a guy that's the place that his family, whenever they have the motorhome conventions or shows at the, at the Civic Center or whatever. That's where he wanted to go. And he likes to look at anything that has to do with a Class A motorhome. He wants to look at it. He knows everything about it. He had a 2-on-1 support, so 2 support staff to 1 person. when I started working with him again, giving him visuals, giving him choices, I was able to find him a job at, actually it's in this area, an RV center, and he details RVs. He loves his job. It's so intrinsically motivating for him. He can't wait until he can go back to work. So, yeah, it's just like, it's finding, yes, it is finding the key. It's finding the relationship. It's creating respect between the two individuals. It's not about, well, we just need to give this person a job, or this person just needs to get along with his, his roommate, or this new person that comes in and is doing everything for them. Again, we constantly ask for people to have the most difficult time with adaptation, to have to adapt to every person, every scenario, and every environment that they walk or have access to. And especially in an industry that experiences a great amount of turnover. We know that, there is a lot of time to build trust and the support strategies. And that has to do with, does that job coach or does that employment provider or that residential provider or that respite care provider or that educational assistant or that teacher know what the communication, functional communication the person uses? And if they don't have one, how do I start creating that? That the person does, do they have choice? Building trust and relationships to strengths and interests, similar to what I just showed you, like I'm going to where the person is. And when I see something that a person really perseverates over, I think of this is the strength that we can build on. Instead of seeing this as being about a barrier, I'm thinking we can use this to this person's advantage and use it that way. It's funny because I have what they're called power cards, and for my son Michael, when he gets a little bit anxious, I have a power card. It's kind of like, it says, what would Sister John do? It's one of his favorite sisters. And what would Sister John do? She would put her seatbelt on. He'll put his seatbelt on. But if I say, what does your sister say? It says, put your seatbelt on. Can you show me? He doesn't want to do it. But as Sister John tells him, that's the whole of the story. She literally, unfortunately, she passed away now about 10 years ago. And she is still in his life every single day. Trust is the basis for any relationship, and it's due to differences in social interpretation. And especially there are sometimes, not sometimes, we learn customs and cultures from, just people, friends, neighbors. There are customs, there are differences in everybody that we learn to, we just accept. But for some folks with disabilities, they might have a culture, or they might have, they interact in a different way that it's involved. This is, a person with autism or intellectual disability may have had occasions in which they too easily trusted someone who has undermined their trust, whether intentionally or not. Often they experience some combination of physical or emotional abuse that led to not trusting someone who might have actually helped the individual. And so what happens when a person doesn't follow through with the trust, actually that experience is sitting right on their shoulder every second. It's not like, sometimes people are triggered by an experience or by somebody that's like, oh, kind of gives you that pain. For that person with, especially a neurodivergent individual, that experience sits with them. And that individual will react oftentimes, that can be seemingly out of the blue, but unless you know their history, you're not going to understand. Another young lady that I worked with, and she was not trusting of both. And that was one of the reasons why they wanted me to come in and start working with her. And I'm like, well, tell me more about her. And, it's like, well, she came to live here. She was a teenager when she came to live in an institution. And I said, so what was the situation? I don't really know. So I'm like, I'm praying, I'm trying to find out more about this person, and what I did finally find out is that she, had her first 4 years in a Romanian, orphanage. She was adopted by an American family who didn't know she had a disability, she had autism. She lived with them, for 7 years before, she went into, crisis stabilization and then into an institutional setting. You think she has trauma in her life? And the expectation is that, well, if I tell you to do something, you need to do it. When she didn't even have that nurturing part in her life as a child. And it's just like, all right, we need to go about this completely different. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but this is exceptional. This is different. And it really comes down to, the golden rule, treat others as you would want to be treated yourself. Being treated as a human being, giving her functional communication, that she had choices. I mean, I didn't take her anywhere until I felt that we had some reciprocity. We had some social reciprocity. We had functional communication reciprocity. We had an activity that we could do together, that we could generalize into the community, like jigsaw puzzle. So we went from her doing that at home to doing it at a coffee shop. That at first I was watching her, and then I asked her if I could engage in it, and then I started. So it was like we built this relationship and got her to the point where she was volunteering at, oh, it wasn't Goodwill, but it's something like a Goodwill or maybe retail or something like that. At any rate, she was doing really well, and I started fading. She had another support person, and she immediately reverted. She just did. The relationship wasn't there. They didn't take time to build it, and that was the unfortunate reality. Unfortunately, I don't know where she is at this point, but it just kind of stabbed me in the heart. And I just, it's like, this just does seem simple, doesn't it? It really does seem like a no-brainer. This is like, well, of course we want to treat people as if they are humans, as if they need the respect and dignity as any other person that we meet. But reality is, however, is that being a paraprofessional, a job coach, residential support, community inclusion specialist, is hard work, and situations can change quickly. And again, we have people who are the most difficult adjusting to people, place, and thing, that we ask them to continually adjust to people, place, and thing. So what started out as a good day can sometimes turn into a crisis. How you handle the challenges will be crucial. If you follow one rule, let it be what is considered, again, the golden rule: treat others as you would want them to be treated. Would you want to be treated by somebody restraining you because you're having a bad day? And so there's always a health and safety consideration, but if you've gotten that far, this person has to get to that level. There's something else seriously going on. In every situation, no matter how serious, how challenging, or how confusing, remember the golden rule, and let it guide your work. What does it, I want, what I want this person needs. So we have to just, put in the back our need for production, our need for, we need to, I need this person, I need compliance, I need these things, because it's not all about us. It's all about the individual, how we're going to help them build that relationship, create an opportunity that it's going to help this person be part of their community, part of, even part of their neighborhood. I can tell you, my son and his dog, I mean, Scooby is his name. That his neighbor next door, he smokes a lot of meats and stuff, and probably, once a week, he throws up a beef bone, whether it's T-bone or something, always throws it up to Scooby, and Bruce comes out and he's like, "Hey, Michael, I got a bone for Scooby," and he's Michael, Scooby, so there's this relationship based on this dog And the neighbor, I mean, so whenever, if Scooby's outside, he runs over to Bruce's house. And he has a doodle as well. Scooby's a doodle, golden doodle, and she is a labradoodle. And they like to play in the backyard together. And that, again, it's one of those situations where, you know, Bruce was open, he loves dogs, and he has welcomed Michael into the neighborhood. That's like, because I have, you know, even imagined anything like that, no, but I'm delighted that I have. So just being a person's basic human rights, is every child, every teenager, every young adult, every adult needs what every person needs is basic human rights. Every student, worker, customer, regardless of disability, has basic human rights. The right to be treated with dignity and respect, the right to privacy, and the right to be safe. You know, it's well, another situation I had with a woman, not a woman, a gentleman that he worked at a bank, and the bank bathroom, for the bathroom for all employees and anybody who, you know, all the patrons of the bank went to this one bathroom. Well, when he's at home, he starts unzipping his pants and starts taking them off before he gets to the bathroom. Of course, they wanted to fire him immediately because he was exposing himself to, you know, people in the lobby. So it was like, Purge, let's hold on. He wasn't trying to expose himself. This is not a scenario, and we're, you know, very sorry for the situation. So I helped the job coach. We helped him understand what is the process of going to the bathroom. And so the fact that he having care providers in his life, doors were never closed. Person, you know, well, their pants were taken down for them. They were, there is no privacy. So that the fact that this person can generalize or assume that there is now a new social rule, I would say for the job coach, shame on you. We needed to have that understanding. So we keep our pants up. And I did a simple social chart. We keep our pants up, go to the bathroom, then you can use the restroom. Make sure the door is locked. I mean, I've done this whole social story, and it's actually on the back of the door in the bathroom. What do I need to look like when I go to work? And it's for all the employees, it's not just for him. Pants are zipped up, buttoned, you know, shirts tucked in, hair looks nice. And it's, you know, like I said, it's not a prompt for just him. It's literally for it's not, it was for everyone. So it was as simple as that. And of course, they were not all that trusting that that was not going to happen again. So they wanted a job coach right beside him every single minute. It did take probably about 4 months to the point where job coach is here, I'm here by the bathroom, and the individual's walking across. And we did that training and basically modeling that, yes, I will keep my pants up. And it took that long for that acceptance. And that's how long it took, but he doesn't need that one-on-one support that they had requested because of that situation. We taught a new skill. So dignity and respect can mean different things for different people. Dignity means the condition of deserving respect. You know, do you believe your student, worker, resident, customer deserves respect? The answer should always be yes. It's, you know, we work and we are parents of individuals that, you know, when my daughter who now lives in the area where she and her husband have lived, they lived in Florida, Texas, Japan, Southern California, and now they're back here. I'm like, yay. But one of the things, I mean, for her is she had a difficult childhood with being a sibling to somebody who had the needs that Michael did. And it was one of those things that she didn't always think that Michael deserved the respect. Now she does. And it's like, just walking a mile in his shoes and thinking about it. She was a child herself, so that, you know, is one thing, but it's just trying to embed this in the minds of, you know, even family and friends is important. And that's what she's doing with her children, my grandchildren, that, you know, Michael is, you know, he's your uncle, and this is what we're gonna do, and this is how you interact with him. And you know, it's evolving because she hasn't really been around except for on vacations and holidays. So he sees her on a regular basis, and it's taken a while to assimilate, but he's just kind of like, first off, I'm sure he's thinking, what are you doing? What are you doing here? You know, and he's actually even said, he'll look at me and goes, what's she doing here? Well, she lives here. Oh, I mean, it's just isn't something that he's has processed. So what is respect? What does respect mean to us, to me? Respect can mean different things. Respect may mean appreciating a person's individuality and their differences. Respect may mean treating someone with compassion and kindness. Respect may mean valuing another person's beliefs or opinions, even if they're different from yours, because they should have their own beliefs, if that's what they believe, because we fortunately live in a country that gives us that opportunity that we could have different beliefs. Respect also includes presuming a person is competent and capable and can do something well. When we put those mindsets in our head, then the lens that we look through isn't that this person is incapable and they're going to be a burden, and that all these things that happen that oftentimes go through people's heads. It's like, I would want this for my loved one. I would want this for anybody that walks through those doors. And I don't know, I mean, I think we're of age that, you know, we've had parents that have probably gone through a stage of needing more help. Could you imagine if they were treated in the way that a lot of people with disabilities were treated, as being less than? You know, I can't imagine someone, and it's, you know, one thing is like, it was like my dad, it's my mom. And I was like, it's Michael, it's everybody with a disability or anybody with, you know, age-related disabilities. It all means that there is a sense of a responsibility on our part to provide that respect. Even when, you know, it's like, I mean, my mom was making something for my dad, and my dad, it was like the last 3 days of his life, and my mom was like, her love language was to cook. I'll cook him something, I'll make him something, you know, whatever. And she was like, he just won't eat it. I'm like, no. he's not going to, Mom. And it was just kind of like one of those, like, he just wants you to be with him. That's it. You know, and it just took a few words like that, and it was like, you know, you're right. Because I'm just trying, the only way that I know how. And I said, you just have to look at through his lens. He's not eating, he's not drinking. What can we do other than just be with him? You know, appreciate individuality and unique differences. You know, respect starts with understanding that all people are different. You know, it's interesting. I've been doing this training series on universal design for learning. And universal design for learning is based on neuroscience. And neuroscience has suggested that each of us learn as different from another as our fingerprints are to another person. It's not just like 7 categories of learning style. We all learn completely different from one another. And we know that respect starts with understanding that all people are different. Each person will have individual strengths, individual challenges, and individual ways that they learn. Since we're all unique, this means that our strategies and methods for support may be completely different. That means a one size does not fit all. A one size of just compliance and repeating yourself oftentimes does not work, especially for somebody who has autism. Every person is different, and quality support recognizes and appreciates these differences. Every time you provide support or instruction, it's crucial to make sure it is individualized and designed to help that person learn on the front end. Why do we have to have a person get to the point of frustration, of literally wetting themselves, or becoming very upset and yelling and screaming before they get their needs met? Would that be something that we would ever think for ourselves that we would want? We need to put on the front end, what do I need to learn to help this person that I am paid to support, to help them find a job, to help them live in the community, to help them, just with their personal care. What does it take, or what do I need to make sure that I am the person I need to be to help support this person? Compassion and kindness goes a long way, a very long way. Another, that component of respect is showing compassion and kindness. Before you criticize someone, you need to walk a mile in their shoes. I need to understand. And sometimes there are people that have that, I would say, that empathy gene, that they're like, oh my gosh, I can walk a mile in their shoes and I can think of it. And while there will be others that are like, I don't see it, I don't get it. And we can't change their minds. What we can do is change what we can change. So we know that the student, the worker, the individual, our son or daughter needs you to understand that he or she sees the world very different from their perspective and may not be able to handle seemingly everyday situations that we go through. So, like going to a dentist. For myself, it's like, I don't like going to the dentist. I want to go to the dentist because I don't want to have people. I don't like cavities as well. So that everyday experience for him is a huge ordeal. And to be prepared for it. And it took me 2 weeks to get him prepared for that appointment. There was no, I didn't say to myself, well, that day he's just gonna go in there. He's just gonna get his teeth cleaned. He's just gonna do this. I had to help him understand who's gonna be there. What were the expectations? Provide him opportunity to just sit in the lobby, to look at who people and where things are going. That helped just environmentally help his anxiety reduce significantly. Just that essence of compassion and kindness. I can tell you, what a difference it made. Whenever I take that time to make sure that he is comfortable, it's always a very good scenario. The first time this week, because I was just buried with other things I had to get done, and a lot of scenarios. And of course, he's gone to several doctors here recently. He had a drop seizure, fell on the floor, split his lip open. And it wasn't until the next day that they noticed that his foot was just, well, part of it was this color, but the rest was dark purple. His whole top of his foot. And so his supported living provider called me and said, this is what happened. I think he broke his foot again because he has broken his foot with a seizure in the past, because he's 210 pounds, 6'2", and just drops completely to the floor. So he does do injury. So they took him in, and I said, I have a book that has all the visuals of all the doctor's appointments, all the things that he's ever gone through. And so they pulled that out and they went through, this is what they're going to do. We're going to go to urgent care. They were there for 2 hours, and I'm still texting, how's he doing? How's he doing? Doing fine, doing great. They were so surprised, and they came out, it's like, he did great. They let him do the x-ray, and they were having problems with it. They had to wait, blah, blah, blah. But taking the time, making sure he's not rushed, providing him with as much information, having opportunities that he can engage in activity. That was, and people that really care and respect for him, he was able to handle it very, very well. When, you or I would be able to go in and be probably annoyed that I have to wait there for 2 hours. But he did really well. So that presuming confidence is to presume confidence means that you believe the person that you work with, your son or daughter, has abilities, and is capable. And maybe it's just shock to some people, lifelong learners. I don't know about you, but I'm still a lifelong learner. I said, I think I've still got some in me. Why would we expect anything less from our sons and daughters? Remember, each person is an intelligent, capable human being with many skills and talents. Every educator, paraprofessional, job coach, residential staff should believe in the person they support and always presume confidence. Like I said, that's one of those things that the woman who with the coffee, the only thing they could think of is we need to remove the coffee and stop it in any way, shape, or form, rather than we can teach her how to go get coffee, have one cup, and then we're done. So the restrictions rarely ever works because, like I said, to the point where she's diving over counters at different stores or any place, or taking coffee from anybody who's even at a picnic table. She's going to take it to. She has coffee when she goes with her. We have a Keurig. She makes 1 cup of coffee, and if it gets full, we heat it up in the microwave, and she's got it again. It's like ta-da! So there's a reason behind it. We all have, our sensory needs that we use. The one thing that I'm standing here, not now I'm sitting, but I usually have hand lotion with me. My husband is with me, and he does have a sensory thing, and he can't have any perfumes or anything around him. And so my hands are dry, and it's actually bugging me. I'm like, I can hear my hands together. Can you hear that? It's like, oh, we have things that we soothe our sensory system to help us, stabilize. And for many people that we work with, they don't, and they don't have those things that we need to make sure that we put in place and don't recognize it as they're being naughty. They've got a barrier and we need to stop it. It means there's an issue here. Let's figure out or develop a hypothesis and provide, maybe they need a skill or a replacement that we can change the outcome of this behavior. Here are some of the ways that we can presume confidence. As I take a little more drink of water, or I should say tea. Listen to and respect the desires of the individual you support and their family, even if those desires conflict with your beliefs. Talk to the person in an age-appropriate voice and about age-appropriate topics. Talk to the person in an age-appropriate tone of voice. Like I said, when that doctor, his name is, I want to say it's Make, Dr. Make. When he came in, he didn't even make eye contact with me. He just came in, looked right at Michael, shook his hand. Glad you're here. I want to help you with whatever your problem is. You want me to talk with you or your mom? It was, and I think Michael was kind of like, almost taken back, like, people don't do that to me. You can just tell that all of a sudden, just his demeanor and how he addressed Michael, obviously, just relaxed him and he fell asleep on my shoulder. Use the student communication system when talking to them. Like I said, a couple of transition students that I've worked with, and actually one that's not a transition student, he happens to be a person with cerebral palsy that has no range of motion, other than he can move his eyes, and he has an eye gaze communication board. And so he can turn on his computer by just gazing, by just looking, and then it will come up and he recalibrates it, and then he will look at this one icon that says, Alexa, turn on the lights, and the lights come on. And it's Alexa, turn on CNN. Not CNN, but ESPN, because he is a sports fanatic. If you were to just look at this young man, I know a lot of people think he is totally not capable. Physically, he's not capable. Mentally, he is sharp as a tack. And given the opportunity, and it takes him And that was, the job coach was like, it takes him a while to really get what he needs. And so he goes, can you help the family, help them use it more often? Well, I went to the family, to their house and met with them. And it's not that he doesn't use it effectively, because he does. He actually plays mahjong online with other people. He plays fantasy football through eye gaze. It's the fact that they didn't have cues. So when they ask him a question, he has to spell it out. And it's like, oh my gosh, no, he needs to have a square that says, how are you doing today? Can I have, well, he doesn't drink water because everything is, he needs suctions all the time, if the nurse does that. But I said, he needs to have statements that he can refer to and reference, so that he's not having to spell things out. It's like, holy cow. And I actually asked the job coach, I said, could you just take some time and just do the eye gaze? And basically what it does, it calibrates to how you see things. So if you're looking straight at something, it will show that you are within a certain range of an icon. And he was, yeah, I can't do this, I got a headache. He was getting kind of nauseous and sick, because motion sickness of always having to move your eyes around. I was like, that's what he goes through. So I said, he actually has 3 levels of communication. He uses his eye gaze device for augmented communication. He also will look at you, and he will do basically facial gestures. Like if he doesn't like something, he'll go. And then he also has one that his mom has developed, and it shows icons across the top and icons down in columns. So she will go across to find out what he wants on this column, and then she'll go down, and then he'll blink for what he wants. So that he has multiple ways of communicating. It's our responsibility to figure it out, and which is interesting, because that's something that I do. But I was able to figure out just by watching him, oh, he has multiple ways of communicating. It just means you have to be attending. You have to look at him. So the communication that they use, communication system, provide multiple modality of instruction, talk directly to the individual, avoid talking about them in front of the person. And if you do need to talk about somebody, like for instance, with Michael's doctor, he said, is it all right if I talk with your mom? And he said, yes. And like I did today, I was talking to, let's say, again, the guy's name is Brad. I said, Brad, I need to talk with Mary. We're going to talk about your job. Can you just hang out for a little bit? Yes or no? And he said, he nodded yes. And I said, great. So I made sure that I didn't just start talking with Mary as if he was nothing. It's like, no, this is about you. You're here in the room. I'm not going to not include you. And even when I was talking with Mary, I would say, this is what we're doing for you, Brad. So he is part of that conversation. Provide respectful support that always shows respect for the person. Teach independence. Like I said, the lady who went in the car and the staff is doing everything for her. That's what that does, is promotes learned helplessness. That this person doesn't have to learn, and sometimes can really resist the fact that, I mean, if you ever had a child that will say, I will do it myself, thank you. And when an adult does that with a disability, what do you think the reaction is to that? They have a behavior, and the behavior needs to be remedied. When it's like, you need to be remedied because this person is certainly telling you that there is something wrong. They can do it for themselves, doggone it. Thank you very much. Provide support that promotes positive peer, coworker, roommate interaction. I tell you, when I hear that somebody's like, oh yeah, we have a house that, we thought it would be good because we have 3 people with autism living there. Really? All right. It's like saying I have 3 redheads living in the same place. I mean, there's no, it's just like they've got one condition but that does not mean that they're going to be able to live together based on disability, based on anything other than I mean, and what happened is one person was, he needed a lot of proprioceptive input. He was a guy, he was bouncing all through the house. He just needed to move, move, move. Other one, he did not like distractions. No distractions. He just needed it quiet and no distractions. They oil and water. Yeah, right. And then the other one kept on going into everyone's room and just taking things because he didn't know what, boundaries meant. So it's like, yeah, how's that working for you? It's like, it's, oh boy, yeah, like I said, we're just gonna have a room full of redheads. Let's see how that works out. I mean, that's about how logical that is. Provide communication supports by either using a computer, or that has a screen that you can type that a person can follow. Augmented communication device. If somebody has one, like a Pro Local to Go, or if they, like I had somebody who just used, could just type on their laptop and communicate, even a pencil and paper. I mean, if I, like with my son, he is old school. If he needs something, he'll look around, and I know he's looking for a piece of paper. So he'll write what he wants because he can't say it. It's there, the mode of planning, everything is not there. Some days, he's just talking a mile a minute. But especially when he's under a lot of maybe stress, sensory issues, his ability to process and then be able to articulate is gone. But it's there, and he just needs to write it down. So having those things available. Have something in a written format or a checklist or diagram or pictures or icons so that you can help provide communication supports. Provide choices, offer written multiple choice rather than open-ended questions. Include the option of something else when something else is available. Structured opportunities, and like I said, for Michael going to the dentist, that was a structured opportunity that I made sure that he had been to the office, he had met staff, he had the opportunity to see what was going on. I'd given him a visual of all the things that the hygienist was going to be doing. We minimized sensory distractions, and we included some that were distracting, meaning he had set his sunglasses on that they usually give when you go to the dentist, but he had a hand mirror. He wanted to see everything that they were doing, and he was just like so enthralled with all of it. It was like, we're gonna have a mirror the next time we go. It was like, I certainly would not want to know what they were doing. He was just engaged. He was like, all right, so that's when he went back and had his tooth filled. He had a mirror and was like, he did great. Social interaction, avoid demanding or expectation. For example, oh, Sally, say hello. Say hello. Come on, go ahead, say hello. If the person wants to say hello, they will say hello. Wait for the other person to engage. Rather than introduce yourself, rather than introduce the person you support to another person, that's what I would say. So Malia, this is my son Michael. Michael, this is Malia. That's what you can do to help. But instead of looking at the person, say hello to her, say hello. Who's that for? I mean, what is that for? Purpose versus production. Like I said, what is the function of this rather than what product are we going to have from this? We're going to complete a task. The employer is going to be happy, or you're going to be, you're going to have a good social behavior and everything's going to be fine. That's the production. The purpose being we have provided this person with choice and a structured opportunity so that they can have the success. Be flexible, sometimes due to the individual processing speed, providing 30-minute visits with communication breaks rather than 20-minute visits without breaks often results in more effective use of time. So, like having a job coach said, I've got an hour with this person. Well, what we're going to do is that we're going to do this, and this. And it's like, break it up into, we're going to work for 10 minutes, then we're going to have a break for 10, work for 10 and 10. It might be then the next time you're working for 15 and then 10, 15 and then 10, and maybe 20 and then 10. It's a processing time for a person, and we need to be flexible with that. Don't assume, ask for more information, rather than try and interpret or assume what a person might be thinking, or speak for them. That's one of the worst things that we can do. If a person is able to, if we take the time to provide functional communication, that the person has a choice, we want to provide that opportunity for the individual. So like I said, rather than interpreting, like the well-meaning care providers for the woman who loved her coffee, they were well-meaning. They were very attentive to her. They did everything for her, to the point that we're going to restrict you ever having coffee. We don't see you as being capable, that we had to shift that mindset and say, of course you are capable. So we can't assume. We have to, and sometimes it's calling in another set of eyes. Tell me, am I missing something? And listen, sometimes no words actually have a lot more than somebody who is talking. Is oftentimes people have learned to communicate the right answer and they don't mean it. Yes. True response to direction or direct questions often requires additional processing to communicate rather than the rote answer. And oftentimes it's like I remember this guy, he every time they went grocery shopping, and unfortunately this was a food related, that they would get him a peanut butter cookie that he would eat while they went grocery shopping, so he was eating something. So they would say, we've taken Alex to go grocery shopping. He did his grocery shopping. No, what he did is he got a cookie while you went shopping. There was no skill in this at all. Next time he went grocery shopping, he had been involved with another care provider who offered him a Butterfinger candy bar. And he wanted that and he ate it. So when he went into the store with the next group, guess what he wanted? The Butterfinger. That cookie isn't gonna do anything. And he's nonverbal. And they're trying to give him a cookie and he's hitting it away. And they're like, no, Alex, come on, this is yours. And he's hitting it away. And then he just runs to the front end. He just starts grabbing Butterfingers. And he's just grabbing it and they're just, it's like mayhem. And it was one, they were motivating him by food. They weren't consistent with their food. They didn't give him choices. And he didn't learn even why he was supposed to be there. Although well-meaning, they were taking him shopping. They didn't, there's a process of scaffolding skills. What do I need to teach him first? What's the next thing? So it is, like I said, it's something that we need to be the detectives and kind of figuring things out as we go along. And like I said, it's just that rote response that, do you want a cookie? Yes. Give him a cookie, he hits it away. It's like, you just said you wanted it. Like, nope, he's been pretty much programmed to do that. And like I said, data, that's something, is just finding out where we've been. We've got, like I said, different people sometimes in our sons and daughters' lives, and each of them have a different starting point. And the same, like I said, the same activity can look very different between people if we're not working on the same skill, using the same way of instruction. And lo and behold, we're like, gosh, we're 6 months into this and we haven't moved yet on anything. Well, it's like, yeah, well, the guy has to adjust to everybody that comes into his life. And then if he's not making progress, then we might want to look at how we're doing the instruction. And data helps us with that. Acknowledge success, not only of our sons and daughters or individuals that we work with, but the support staff that works with them as well. It literally is a dual system. We need to support our support providers, our job coaches, so that they're respected and we recognize the quality, the integrity, the work that they're doing, and we want that express to our kids as well. Our first impressions are everything. The first impression is the last impression for a lot of our kids. That's all you only get a first impression. It's like, no, you mess it up the first time, I'm not gonna give you a second. My brain doesn't work that way. So the first impression, like I said, needs to be a positive one. Again, just looking at the dentist's office, one dentist was like, I don't think so. The other one's like, what do you need? Let's do it. That's, even for me, that was the lasting impression for that. Like, do I have more? I have more. So, and I'm almost running, I have run out of time. So I have provided visuals, telling people about what it is to make choices, how long time, what is time passing, when am I going to be here, who's going to be with me. Having calendars for folks is very important. Follow through, like I said, don't change things unless you give the person ample time to process that. Consider person-centered planning or essential lifestyle planning. And like I said, this is just a repeating. Relationships begin with trust, respect, understanding, communication, joy, choice, and patience. I think I am done. Sorry, when I put this together, it's like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna have much. I mean, I don't have enough content, but obviously I can talk until the cows come home. So, thank you. I hope that, I know that some of it obviously resonated because there's some of it's interesting for the years that I've been providing training that it's like a new generation of ahas that come along. And I can tell you that even from sometimes when I'm doing my own trainings, I'm like, oh, duh, I just am reminded of things. It's just a different way of how our brains work than a person who has autism. Whether they have autism and an intellectual disability, or they have autism without a disability, intellectual disability. Autism is like the different, search engine for a computer. It's either a Google or it's a Bing, right? I mean, they're just completely different. And they'll just the way that the brains process information, and we just have to take that in consideration and be mindful and respectful of that. So it's Friday. Yay. Woo-hoo. So I hope you all have a good weekend. I'm headed to go see my daughter and son-in-law and grandchildren. They live in Gig Harbor now. So I know, right? Even though I live in Clark County, I'm always in Kitsap County, so I have to go by Gig Harbor all the time. Right? Much probably to my daughter's chagrin, but I haven't had my fellow grandkids like that. So